Okay, good evening, everybody. Let's open the November 17th council meeting. Please note that the Mayor Yoloa and Councilmember Hargrove are not here this evening. And let's start off with the flag salute. Please rise. Mark Lucio, would you lead us in the flag salute? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Lucio. First item up is to report on a closed session. So it's good to see our city attorney, Fred Galante, and Matt Ballantyne actually sitting up at the dais. It's been, since March, since you guys were up here? We've had you down at a little table with social distancing, but now there's plenty of room up here tonight for social distance. So,
well,
Mr. Galante.
Good to be back.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council and audience. The City Council met in closed session and held a discussion on all items listed on the closed session agenda, beginning with item number 1, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, the case existing matter of Monte Vista Water District and City of Chino versus the Dow Chemical Company et al. City Council received an update with Attorney Todd Robbins on the phone, as well as Council Member Rodriguez by phone in closed session. And the City Council received that update and provided direction. No further reportable action was taken. Item number 2, City Council held a discussion on 2 items of an anticipated litigation under the heading Initiation of Litigation. As to the first matter, the City Council received status of that potential litigation matter, and no further reportable action was taken. As to the second item, City Council discussed that item and a potential challenge on the regional housing needs allocation issues. And by motion of Mayor Pro Tem Howie, seconded by Councilmember Lucio, carried 3-0, again with the absent council members as previously reported. The council directed that staff issue a letter to the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, supporting a legal action against the HCD state agency on the allocation of RENA numbers. And that concludes the report out of closed session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galante. Now, I'll ask our city manager, do we have any additions to the agenda?
Mayor Pro Tem, I have no changes or additions to the agenda. Thank you.
All right, thank you. There is an economic development report for October for some information. I believe it's on the website. And then I'll move into public announcements. So first up, this is the time and the place for the mayor to inform the public of upcoming events and past occurrences community-wide of interest and concern. However, prior to announcing our upcoming events and programs, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being conducted as a hybrid with GoToWebinar being made available to both members of the public and the City Council. For all members of the public wishing to remotely participate and comment on any items on the agenda, we ask that you please email us at cityclerk@cityofchino.org or select raise your hand icon if you have registered via the GoToWebinar. Our staff will either read your comments into the record or unmute your line so so that you may verbally provide input. Okay? Okay, so first I got a few announcements I have to read, and I'd like to point out under the consent item tonight, to begin with, we're recognizing Thursday, November 19th as the Great American Smokeout Day in Chino. Encourage all tobacco users to demonstrate to themselves and their loved ones that they can quit using these harmful and deadly products. Also, we'll be recognizing Flo's Airport Cafe, Rebecca Caballero, as well as Juan and Maria Uribe as this year's Waste Management Recycling All-Stars. Each of you has demonstrated a concern and commitment to our environment by consistently taking steps to appropriately recycle. These efforts not only have implications now, but for future generations as well. Thank you for your efforts. Additionally, while she's not in the audience tonight, I'd like to recognize Alma Jimenez for earning the November 2020 Mayor's Home Beautification Award. I believe staff is showing it on the screen right now. Yep, that looks really nice. It's because of your hard work that Chino can continue to be a great place to work, to live, and play. Congratulations, and thank you for everything you do. Next, I'd like to remind everyone that this year's annual tree lighting ceremony will be held in 2 weeks, Tuesday, December 1st, just before the City Council meeting. As usual, the tree lighting ceremony will begin at 6 p.m., where everyone can join council as we flip the switch. However, please note that during the event, we ask that everyone please wear face coverings and maintain social distancing so that we can all be safe as we enter the holiday season here at Chino City Hall. Following the tree lighting ceremony, the City Council meeting will begin at 7 p.m. in the City Council chambers. For more information on the tree lighting ceremony and the City Council meeting, please call our admin department, 909-334-3304. Also, I want to give an early reminder to everyone to please join us for the 9th Annual Chino Valley YMCA Reindeer Romp at Ayala Park. Please note that while a virtual event will be offered, due to the Chino Valley YMCA is offering a live event. Moreover, to ensure social distancing during the live event, they're going to be having you can actually run in the event, and with participants starting between 7 and 8:30. So I guess you can come up, get your starting time in advance, and you can start the race anytime between 7 and 8:30. All participants may additionally, for safety purposes, there'll be no awards at the end. Now, as soon as you're done, your time will be posted. There'll be no awards ceremony because of COVID, but the results will be published right away. Also, for all those wishing to register, visit runsignup.com and search Reindeer Romp. Additionally, please note that a $5 discount will be offered to those registering before November 29th. After November 29th, you'll have to pay $40. For any questions, you can call or email the YMCA at romp@weymca.org or call 909-597-7445. And lastly, I'd like everyone to please note that the City Council will be closed. City Council will be closed on November 26th and 27th in observance of Thanksgiving. City Hall will reopen on Monday, November 30th, as its regular operating hours of 7:30 to 5:30 p.m. Okay, that ends that. And now it's time for public comments. This is the time and the place for the general public to address the City Council about subjects that do not appear on the agenda due to council policy and Brown Act requirements. Action will not be taken on any issues not on the agenda. Okay, and if you are going to speak, we limit your speaking time to 5 minutes. First up, I have John Mata from Calvary Chapel, Chino Valley, to provide our invocation. Come on up, John. At this time, I'd like to invite anyone who wishes to join us in the invocation to please stand.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, city manager, city attorney. Thank you for this privilege of allowing me to be here. So let's pray. Father, we thank you for this privilege of coming before you to present this council meeting into your hands. We come to you in the name of Jesus, asking for your guidance and your wisdom to lead this city with the care that you lead us with. I ask, Lord, that you would guide the affairs of this meeting and strengthen those who you have appointed and entrusted to be part of this council through every decision that is made, that each one here will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. I lift up our Mayor Pro Tem, that you would grace him with wisdom that comes directly from your heart and from your immeasurable knowledge, that he would lead in the affairs that you have appointed and entrusted him through the power of your Holy Spirit. We ask, Lord, that you would guide with your skillful eye the duties and services of our city manager, our city attorney, and all council members and leadership, that we may never forget or take for granted the work that you have appointed for our leaders to oversee. Please guide and protect our law enforcement officers, firefighters, our first responders. Protect them as they put their lives on the line for this beautiful city. Guide our chief of police and our fire chief in their duty to serve and protect our city. And Father, I ask that you'd watch over all the families of all those mentioned here this evening, and that your name will be always glorified and honored. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay. So continuing with public comments, Angela, do we have anybody who has sent any request in for any public comments?
Mayor Pro Tem Howie, we do not have anyone.
Okay, anybody in the audience wish to, now's your time to come up on anything that's not on the agenda, now's your chance. Okay, seeing none, let's move on. Next up, item is the consent calendar. At this time, members of the public may present testimony as to why an item should be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion. Unless a member of the public or city council requests an item to be removed from the consent calendar, all items will be acted on as a whole and by one vote. Angela, do we have anybody requesting to pull any of the consent items?
No, Mayor Pro Tem Howie, we do not.
Okay. Any of our council members wishing to pull an item? Anybody in the audience wishing to comment on any of the items on the consent calendar? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Or, Angela?
Do we have to do it verbally?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I make the motion.
And I'll second it.
Councilmember Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Howie?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0 with Mayor Yoloa and Councilmember Hargrove absent.
All right. Thank you, Angela. Okay, now we're into public hearings. Prior to the vote of the city council, any member of the audience will have the opportunity to address the council on any items listed under public hearings. Council requests, but it's not required that you state your name and address prior to making any comments. Item number 17, the 2020-2030 Climate Action Plan Update, adoption of the update and related addendum to the original 2013 Chino Climate Action Plan. And I'll open the public hearing at this time in our staff report by Warren Morleon, City Planner. Warren?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. Oh, there we go. Good evening. For the past year and a half, the city has been in the process of updating the Climate Action Plan to keep up with state guidelines. Because the CAP is in such a technical item, very detailed, I thought I'd bring up the consultant to go ahead and talk to you guys and present the project. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention to you a couple things. Back in October, the Planning Commission reviewed the project and recommended approval of it to the council. I also want to point out that tonight you'll be approving the CAP by resolution and also be approving the environmental document that's associated with the CAP, which is an addendum. Just wanted to point those two things out in case they don't get covered. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Hendricks. He's with LSA, our consultant for the CAP. He's going to go ahead and present it to you, short presentation, and then answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
Good evening. So I represent the consulting team that worked with city staff in developing the Climate Action Plan update. And I'll just skip that part, get right to the meat of it. The original CAP was adopted in 2013 using a programmatic EIR. It set 2020 as a target based on state legislation, in particular Assembly Bill 32 as a reduction target. The CAP was successful in meeting that target and very successful in keeping economic competitiveness while adopting or implementing the reduction measures within that original CAP. Reasons for the update include the fact that the current cap had a 2020 horizon year, and we're here at 2020. New state legislation has developed that the city needs to address, and city planning staff adopted a proactive approach to addressing state legislation rather than just passively accept it. In particular, city planning staff wanted to maintain local control of the issue of climate change, make sure that it fit within the context of the character for the city. And the city wants to continue that progress that it's made in the original cap. So, excuse me. Some of the goals in the cap include that local control I talked about, having reduction measures that fit within the context of the community character, keeping economic competitiveness for the city of Chino as the measures are implemented. So developing measures and a process in implementing them in a way that does not impede in any way the economic growth that is occurring in Chino, and that continues. The contents of the cap are pretty straightforward. It has an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions and then forecasts into the future. The inventory included its original baseline of 2008, and then updated a 2016 inventory. So now you have kind of a line of progress, if you will, something you can see in what direction the city is going as far as emission goes. And then it had forecasts for 2020 and 2030, along with targets for 2020 and 2030. So this graphic is best shows all of that in one picture. You can see the emission trend between 2008 and 2016. And that dashed line, that green line, is a forecast if we continued that trend. And you can see that those emission levels are well below the reduction targets, both for 2020 and what we expect for 2030 with the update of this cap. The business as usual forecast is the line that would occur if we just maintain 2016 level of regulations and let the cap expire, where emissions would go. And you could see that there's just an ever so slight trend upward as opposed to that downward trend. So reduction measures were devised for transportation sector, energy, renewable energy, waste, solid waste, water efficiency, and the development review process. More of a focus in this cap update was on the existing built environment. So taking advantage of the utilities, energy efficiency rebate programs and energy efficiency advocacy programs, low-income housing, retrofits, things like that. Changing out the existing traffic signals and streetlights with LEDs, and continuing on with that. The development review process was done through what we call screening tables. This is a menu of options that developers can pick and choose what best fits their projects. And as long as they achieve 100 points, they're deemed to be consistent with the climate action plan. Each point is calculated to be the expected reduction associated with that menu of option. So that whole context of screening tables in this menu of options relies a lot more flexibility. Projects can custom fit their obligations under the cap to fit the context of their project. That allows for greater economic competitiveness and will continue what I would call a CEQA safe harbor as far as GHG emissions calculations and thresholds. And I don't know if you've watched the news, but a lot of jurisdictions get hung up on this. And Chino has been blessed with because it has a cap, of just hearing from this plan. So cap implementation is a series of monitoring progress of the cap, ensuring that you're achieving the reduction measures. Given the history of the 2013 cap, it seems like the city's well-positioned to continue that progress and that trajectory that it began. With that, I think I have questions, if there are any questions. And I tried to make this as brief as possible. I may have skipped over a lot of
We
technical stuff.
appreciate that, Michael. Any questions, Mr. Lucio? You have any questions at this point? Okay, how about Mr. Rodriguez?
I want to commend, I read the report, and it's very well written, and it's good hand in hand not only with state and guidelines, but also with SCAG outlines for future SoCal connected. Very good.
You're breaking up a bit, but I commend you for having read the climate action plan. Sounds like you read through the whole thing.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, if anybody in the audience. Wait, I'm sorry, what did he say? Okay.
As I was saying, it follows about.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, this is the report that we got. So it's pretty lengthy, and it's got a lot of information in there, and I think it's interesting to me though. I'm glad that since 2008, in the last 12 years, we've been able to lower a lot of the things with the increase of population that we have. You figure there's a lot more traffic, there's a lot more vehicles that we had 12 years ago, and we've been in a downward trend. And the projection in the next 10 years is not much of an increase of what it is today, but we're still growing. So we're going to have more people. I'm sure that's going to be a challenge. It'll be interesting to see 10 years from now where we actually are on these numbers. But I think I like the little picture you had an electric vehicle in there for 2030. So I'm obviously could play a big part in this as far as this goes. I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the main reasons of continued reductions, of course, energy efficiency, but also on the vehicle side, even the gas-driven vehicles are getting cleaner and cleaner. So, and then we go to electric, they're very clean.
Sure. And we have less cows, so that means there's less methane, so that's probably a good thing. But anyway, anybody out there wishing to speak on this particular item? Any questions out there? Public, you can still speak about this, and if not, okay. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, I'll close the public hearing, and any other council members have any other questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Paul, you want to second it?
I'll second, yes.
Okay, very good. Hey, we got a motion and a second. Angela?
Councilmember Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Howie?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, very good, thank you. Good report on that. Next item up is number 18, final acceptance of public improvements and development impact fees credit and reimbursement agreement, parcel map 196089, Kimball Business Park. Okay, this is for the final acceptance of public improvements. And our staff report is from our transportation manager, Dennis Rawls. Dennis?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. Tonight is a re-look at continued from a previous council meeting of the Sares Regis project and acceptance of the public improvements. At a previous council meeting, Mr. Stubby Barr had presented some concerns with several aspects of accessibility as relates to the public improvements. And City Council asked staff to go back and re-look at the project and come back with our findings. So I'm here tonight to present our findings and to hopefully recommend that we accept the project. So with that, if we could go to the presentation, please. Oh, we are, okay. Staff met with Mr. Barr and discussed in detail the specific items of concern. And in fact, this evening, he sent a 163-page report outlining several of those topics that were discussed during that meeting. Some of those high-level ones I'll point out tonight. That document included reference to several of the documents that I'll also reference in this presentation tonight. It's important to note that I don't have quick control. Not yet.
Must be another way to do
Thank you.
Here we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, so to kind of bring everyone's frame of reference back to the project, Sares Regis is an industrial project in the preserve. It is along Kimball, Hellman, and Flight Avenues. And it's important to point out that this project has been in development for a very long time. It first came to the Planning Commission for approval back in July of 2016. And through its design of public improvements, actually went through a one-year time period where street improvements were redesigned. In specific, were concerns raised about accessibility. At that time, the city was really getting a better focus on how accessibility affects our development process. And so staff instructed the developer to go back and redesign several of the public improvements to meet accessibility related concerns. So that process took about a year to accomplish. In that time, several other things occurred in the city. In December of 2019, the city adopted the policy on accessibility for pedestrian facilities. And in March of 2020, the truck routes are modified and specifically affects this project because Kimball Avenue was removed as a truck route. Prior to then, Kimball Avenue was a truck route, and so a lot of the design related accessibility functions needed to account for the truck route at the time, since that was a designated route. And ultimately, in September of 2020, the item was brought to City Council and continued. So to kind of get a feel for what was built along with the project in terms of the public improvements, there was some underground utility work along Enterprise Way, the half-width improvements of several streets, Flight, Kimball Avenue, and Hellman Avenue. Both of those avenues included median improvements, as well as the continuation of the community paseo, the shared use path along Hellman Avenue on the west side. 2 new traffic signals were built along Kimball at Flight and Meadow Valley, and the traffic signal at Hellman and Kimball was modified as part of the improvements that were all constructed under this project. One of the concerns raised by Mr. Barr was, the main focus of his concerns were that several governing documents may have been violated in terms of the design and construction of the improvements. And in specifically, one document was the Preserve Specific Plan. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is what the Preserve Specific Plan specifically calls out for this area. You can see highlighted in yellow in the box there is where the project is located, and the classification and right-of-way designations for the streets along those segments are included. And I pasted in clip bits from the street section development from the specific plan directly that identify where the street width, the curb-to-curb street widths are, the sidewalks are, and in particular, the shared use paths. Along with that in the Preserve Specific Plan is the bicycle plan. And so again, and this is straight out of the specific plan, with the project area highlighted in yellow. In particular are 2 different lines that are highlighted in the specific plan. The red ones are Class 2 bicycle facilities. These are bike lanes that are on the street. They're usually segmented with striping and delineated and given dedicated space. The green are what are referred to in the specific plan as community paseos. And it's our understanding in our discussions with Mr. Barr that it's how these facilities in particular were constructed that are of particular concern, and what the majority of this presentation will cover. One of the things I want to point out is that as the specific plan called these community paseos, that terminology has evolved over time, and today we actually call those a shared use path. It's actually a Class 1 bicycle facility where the bicyclist is separated from the roadway. And in this case, it's sharing the facility with pedestrians. So when we do that and mix bicyclists and pedestrians, you have to take a look at that bicycle facility under a whole new set of rules and criteria that I'll go into more in the coming slides. One of the things that I also want to point out is that while the specific plan called out these community paseos, you can see kind of in the comment taken out of the specific plan below, is that they were meant to be conceptual in nature. The idea behind them, the feel behind them, was that it was meant to be a recreational amenity for the community. It certainly wasn't, at least from my understanding, endeavored to be a full-blown transportation facility of a regional connector where you might connect, say your residential land uses to employment centers and use the bicycle facilities to connect those two specifically. Not that they can't be, but certainly the intention was more of a recreational facility for the families that live in the preserve to use and enjoy. And that's important to note because that kind of framed a lot of how the facilities were designed as we moved forward in designing the preserve. So I'm going to get into quite a bit of the technical codes that relate to shared use paths and Class 1 bikeway facilities. These were some specific codes that were brought up by Mr. Barr and some that I've gone back and reread numerous times to make sure that I understood what they said. And in particular, the California Streets and Highways Code is one of the first ones I mentioned there, Section 891. It really talks about how the state is required to develop safety design criteria. That design criteria end up becoming what's referred to now as a Caltrans Highway Design Manual, which is referenced in another section of the Streets and Highways Code. That manual really serves as a guiding document for how the engineers in the state of California are to design their roadways. That includes bicycle facilities. And in particular, there's a complete section on bikeway design criteria that talks about some of the issues we're going to talk about tonight. Another part of that Streets and Highways Code talks about how the signs and markings and traffic control devices are needed to be designed by Caltrans or the Department of Transportation into a document that can be followed by all of us. And so that is the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or the California MUTCD. So that also has a part that's dedicated directly to bicycle facilities that talks about how signage, roadway markings like road signage, how that all gets applied to bicycle facilities. And so I'll be talking more about that in going through this. As we talked with Mr. Barr specifically about his concerns, the two big ones that he raised to our attention were two big ones related to how shared use paths are to be designed. And that is that the first one is that shared use paths should be free of obstructions. This guidance comes from the ADA accessibility guidance, which refers to another book, another reference from transportation officials, AASHTO, which is an acronym for the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. This is a federal organization recognized by most governments as a guiding principle for transportation facilities. In particular, they publish a guidebook on bicycle facilities, and that is referenced here by section. The state of California, as I mentioned before, has the Highway Design Manual, which further takes those guidance from AASHTO and refines them for California purposes. This particular section talks about how there should be minimum horizontal and vertical clearances along a shared use path. The idea behind this is as bicyclists and pedestrians are using this facility, we want to make sure that we maintain a nice wide open space so that as they progress down these facilities, that they're able to pass each other in both directions freely and without having to worry about obstructions in the way. And so there's criteria that we're supposed to follow for that. Another criteria that was specifically mentioned is the width of the ramps at shared use paths. Those same documents I mentioned before talk about how we should be providing ramp widths that are as wide as a shared use path that created them. In this case, in the preserve, that's 13 feet wide. The ramps that this project built were 5 feet wide, so it was considerably less. And what I wanted to point out is that although we did not meet that specific criteria, it doesn't mean that we necessarily broke any regulation per se. Accessibility requires that we provide a 4-foot minimum, and our own Chino policy on accessibility facilities requires us to provide a 5-foot minimum. So that was provided with this project. But why is it that the city decided to design, construct, and are now bringing to you forward to approve these facilities while they didn't meet these criteria? Well, part of that is that we have conflicting criteria that comes along with trying to meet everything that we need to do. You have accessibility guidance that talks about the slopes and the locations and how the design of the ramps should be constructed. There are design guidance by these same books that talk about how traffic signals are supposed to be designed, the placement of the poles, where they're to be placed, the alignment of the signal heads over the roadway. All that gets taken into account. The location of the pedestrian push button to activate a pedestrian crossing at intersections. There are criteria that all go into how and where those are to be placed. And what we end up finding is that there becomes circumstances where some of those criteria end up conflicting. We cannot meet all of these criteria simply by trying to meet them all to the letter. So what we have to do as engineers is use our best judgment to understand what these criteria mean, how are to be implemented, and how best can we solve the concerns we have with modifying existing facilities to put in these devices. One of the things with traffic signal design, it's a plan that's designed for a traffic signal is really schematical in nature. While it does try to do its best to point out specific locations of where these poles can be placed, part of the concern is that we often don't have a full picture of what exists underground. So some of the larger poles that are built at intersections have foundations that are nearly 5 feet in diameter and 16 feet deep. You have these mast arm poles that are up to 60 feet long, and we have to support the wind load of all of that weight on there. And so there are strict guidelines by these same documents and more that talk about how and where and the whys of why we have to put traffic signal poles where we need to. And so while we try to really get them placed where we want them to be placed, out of the way as much as possible, when we go to actually dig in the ground to go place that foundation, that pole, we often find that there are objects and other underground utilities in the way that were not accounted for in the design and simply could not be known. In my experience in all the traffic signals I've built, I have yet to have a traffic signal plan go in per plan exactly as it was meant to be. So that ends up becoming some of the challenges in terms of the design versus the construction of these facilities. Another concern we have is that in creating these shared use paths where bicyclists and pedestrians are now on a particular facility where they cross intersections and have to interact with vehicle crossings, there's some inherent risk in that. And my next slide will kind of go into what some of that risk looks like and really kind of illustrate some of the concerns I have as a traffic engineer in mitigating those risks. So this diagram is straight out of the same AASHTO book that I've been talking about before. These 5 boxes here represent some of the concerns that we're to look at as engineers and make sure we mitigate for. One of the things we want to really try to keep a hold of is make sure that as a bicyclist approaches a crossing, that they understand that they are approaching a vehicle crossing and that they treat it as such and that they don't just blow through the crossing. And so that top center graphic kind of depicts that a vehicle pulling up into an intersection may not realize that a bicyclist is approaching from a sidewalk or, in this case, a shared use path. And so we have to pay close attention to that. When there is a separate facility provided for, some bicyclists still may prefer to ride the roadway. Even though we've provided a separate facility for them, they may still choose to ride in the street. And with some of these streets in the preserve, that was not accounted for in terms of providing a separate space for them. So they'll have to share a lane with the vehicles. And so there could be some concern with that, which is represented by the top right graphic. The other bottom 3 all talk about turning movements of vehicles and vehicles specifically crossing a shared use path crossing. And because these facilities are bidirectional and not on both sides of the street necessarily, you have a condition where bicyclists may be approaching from a direction where a vehicle may not be intending to see them coming from. You know, if they're looking to make a right turn coming off of a side street, they're looking to the left for oncoming traffic, not necessarily a bicyclist coming from the right who may have the green. And so all of these things play into how we design these facilities to make sure that we've tried to mitigate these risks. So what did we end up with? Ultimately, we ended up building these rather large corners. There's a lot of concrete there. And you can see this is a picture of the northwest corner, or these are photographs of the northwest corner of Hellman and Kimball, right on the corner of the project. This is the corner in particular that was modified significantly by the project. And you can see the traffic signals are placed, and in particular the pedestrian push buttons are kind of out in the middle of where the ramps sort of begin. That's part of what I was talking about in terms of the criteria of where these push buttons have to be placed. There's criteria that involved from a signal design standpoint where we have to get these buttons placed in such a location that they meet some of those design guidance. And since we were providing such a large concrete area, all of which meets accessibility requirements, you know, the choice to put these buttons in these locations was a conscious one. In moving through some of the other photos, you'll see that it illustrates how, in fact, the ramps are not 13 feet wide. They don't continue the width of the shared use path, nor are they perfectly aligned with such. This kind of helps from my perspective in terms of mitigating those risks that I mentioned before. By doing this, and as you can see on the approach, as a bicyclist approaches these intersections, they can see that the intersection wasn't fully developed in such a way that the bicyclist can go straight through the intersection. There needs to be some acknowledgement of the fact that they're approaching this crossing. And so by having these facilities designed the way they are, it really helps cause the bicyclist to stop, pause, and use the crossing as a pedestrian would, which is what, in this case, we're looking to do. And then this is just more photos of the other intersection that was built at Kimball and Flight. So these photos were actually captured live from our traffic management center. As part of the improvements that were built with the traffic signals out there, we have cameras out there that are viewing traffic monitoring. The police department also has access to these cameras. And one of the things I want to point out is that we have families of people using these facilities as they were intended. The top three photographs are actually the same point of view taken at three different times, just spliced together to kind of show you this family who traveled along Hellman and crossed the street there and did so conveniently and safely without any of the impediments really having an effect on their travel. The same thing with the photographs down below. You can see people riding bikes, going through the areas along the corners, navigating through the spaces provided between the signal poles and the shared use paths. And the other traffic signal devices, you can see there's cabinets there that are within the pathway. And this is kind of to help give you some perspective on the pedestrian, the size of the pedestrian and them using the facility. This goes into what I was talking about too, about the location of those poles. When a pedestrian hits those buttons, the traffic signal receives that input and has a timer that it reacts to. And so we have to provide some time to cross. And so that goes into that criteria I talked about on where those buttons need to be placed to make sure that we can accomplish providing safe crossing time for those pedestrians. And then I just grabbed a quick snapshot of trucks. This truck is legally on Hellman Avenue, crossing down Hellman. Just to point out that this was in fact a truck route and still needs to be treated as such. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that staff feels that we followed the general plan. We followed the preserve-specific plan. We followed all of the criteria, accessibility, the various state and federal codes, but that we did so meeting all the minimum requirements. That's not to say that we've built the facilities the way they should have been, but we are endeavoring to do better with every single project. And in fact, projects currently under design now are treated differently. The signal at Hellman and Legacy, if you've driven by there recently, you'll see is got 13-foot shared use path ramps. And we are putting in signal bicycle-specific devices to help crossing at these locations. But all in all, the improvements built by Sares Regis were all designed by professional engineers. They were all checked and approved by staff and professional engineers. They were constructed by professionals and inspected by city staff. And it's therefore that staff feels comfortable with bringing these facilities forward for acceptance tonight. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rawls. Let me ask you a question. When you were in high school, did you ever decide, whatever made you decide to become a transportation engineer? I'd like to know that. I think we've got quite an appreciation of all the particulars of this particular business.
It's interesting. I actually didn't decide to become a traffic engineer till later in my career. I would say, although I've been in my career for about 20 years, it was really the last 15 that I found that traffic engineering was my passion.
Wow, you must really like to read those regulations and
Oh, yeah.
numbers. Anyway, thank you for the report.
Sure.
All right, well, let's see, how about some, do we have any council comments on this particular item?
You know, I'm obviously, we got Mr. Barr's 163-page document kind of late. It was like 324, I think it came in. But in looking at some of the things he's pointing out, if you look at I think it's page 17 of the pictures that he took, and he's looking at the northwest corner of Meadow Valley and Kimball, and it shows obviously a large traffic box that's there in the middle of the walkway. Then he indicates on there that there's only 36 inches between the signal pole and the box, but he's saying that it's required to have 60 inches, or 36 inches, but it's required to have 60 inches. Is that accurate?
Our policy on accessibility does require pinch points to be, I believe it's actually no more than 4 feet, and I don't have it in front of me, so please don't quote me on that. I think ADA actually allows for a momentary reduction down to 36 inches, which I think is why it's 36 inches in this case. The 60 inches, I think, comes from just the general fact that we're trying to maintain a 5-foot wide pedestrian walkway in all cases whenever we can.
Okay, and then in a lot of the pictures, obviously, that he's showing us and he sent us, where he's indicating that they have either signal lights that are in the middle of the walkways, or boxes that are in the middle of the walkways, and he puts X's in them. Are those out of the ordinary, or is this something that is normally allowed? Because my whole concern is, if we accept this project, do you feel confident that if litigation comes after where they're going to say that we didn't comply with ADA, are you comfortable in defending that?
Yes, if I may, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, we've reviewed this along with your staff, and we concur with the analysis that some of these requirements that were highlighted in Mr. Barr's letter don't necessarily pertain to the path of travel. So long as the adequate path of travel is provided, not every single area would have to comply with that distance requirement. As we've reviewed this from an ADA standpoint, we haven't seen any indication that anything is out of compliance. I also have Ross Trindle with my office, who has worked a little bit more intimately with staff on these particular issues, and he's available to answer those questions as well.
So, Ross, are you comfortable?
Yes.
Okay. You want to step up to the mic?
Yes, I agree with the city attorney, Fred Galante, that we have worked together with staff to come to an agreement on the acceptability of these improvements as presented.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No.
How about you, Paul? You got some comments?
No, it sounded okay, but I with Mr. Lucio, be full in compliance with ADA.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Anybody else in the audience? This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this particular item? Okay, seeing none. Okay. All I can say is we worked a lot. This This has been a long time coming, this particular project. And I think I feel comfortable with this. I mean, our staff has worked countless hours on this particular project, and I think we used to do things a lot differently. We're still getting better, but I think this project needs to move along. And so I will make a motion to approve it. I'll look for a second.
I'll go ahead and second it.
Angela?
Mayor Pro Tem Howie,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Item passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your report. Traffic engineer. Oh, boy. Okay. Let's see, next item up is professional services agreement, construction management, testing, and inspection services for the Eastside Water Treatment Expansion Plant and Brine Line Project, which is to approve a professional services agreement with TRC Engineers in the amount of $1.7 million, construction management, testing, and inspection services. Our staff report from our principal engineer, Amanda Coker. Amanda?
Good evening. The city has completed the design for the expansion of the Eastside Water Treatment Facility with construction bids for the project due on December 3rd. The project also includes a brine disposal pipeline component, which is approaching 90% design. Construction costs for both the Eastside Water Treatment Facility expansion and the brine disposal pipeline are estimated to be $15.5 million. Construction of the expanded treatment plant and the brine line will occur in parallel. There are complex construction and coordination elements for both portions of the project, including the necessity of keeping the existing treatment plant in operation, environmental monitoring, and coordination between multiple stakeholders for the construction of the brine line. In light of this, staff prepared an RFP to solicit a construction management firm with similar experience to manage the construction portion of the project. On July 10, 2020, an RFP was advertised on Planet Bids to provide construction management, testing, and inspection services for the project. 10 proposals were received, and after evaluation and interviews, TRC Engineers was selected as the firm providing the best value to the city. After selecting TRC, staff negotiated the cost proposal from about $2.255 million to $1.546 million, which is approximately 10% of the total estimated project construction cost. Staff recommends award of a professional services agreement in the amount of $1.7 million to TRC Engineers, which includes changes in scope up to 10%. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the audience wish to comment on this item? Okay. How about council comments? Any, Paul, you got anything on this item?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make the motion.
Motion from Councilmember Lucio,
I'll
second.
second.
Second from Councilmember Rodriguez. Okay. Angela?
Councilmember Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Howie.
Yes.
Item passes 3-0.
Okay, all right, moving right along. Item number 20, professional services agreement, Epic Solutions right-of-way agent services. And approve an amendment in the professional service agreement with Epic Land Solutions for amount of $143,375. Authorize the city manager to execute necessary documents. And our civil engineering manager, Maria Frazier, is going to give us a report. Huh, Maria?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and audience. Epic Land Solutions was one of two firms selected via the city's formal procurement process for on-call right-of-way agent services. Epic's agreement was approved by council in October 2018, and since then it's been amended annually in the amount of $50,000. In one occasion for an additional amount of $11,710 to assist staff with the right-of-way coordination and negotiations for the property that will house the Benson Avenue Permanent Lift Station. Epic has been actively and effectively been assisting staff in successful completion of right-of-way coordination and negotiations for various projects and has been able to fulfill our right-of-way needs. Staff is presently in need of right-of-way expertise to assist with the Pine Avenue right-of-way acquisitions and Edison permit processing. Based on both firms' qualifications, Epic proved to be the most suitable to handle the complexities of this project, as Epic has extensive experience with similar projects. City staff solicited a quote from Epic for right-of-way coordination and acquisition services to assist staff with Edison permitting and processing, and a proposal in the amount of $120,135 was received. Concurrently, Development Services also identified the need for the same type of services for the Pine Avenue widening project, a separate project, which is in a segment east of the Pine Avenue Connector project. The services will include coordinating with the Army Corps of Engineers, Caltrans, and managing property acquisitions and negotiations. This additional services quote was for an amount of $23,240 for a total not to exceed contract amendment amount of $143,375. Therefore, staff is requesting the council approves the staff report with the recommendations indicated. This concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Frazier. Anybody wishing to address the council on this item? Okay. Any council comments? No? Okay, I'll entertain a
No.
motion.
I'll make the motion.
I motion we move.
Okay, a second from Mr. Rodriguez and a motion from Councilmember Lucio. Angela?
Councilmember Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Howie?
Yeah, that's a yes.
Item passes 3-0.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Frazier gets to sit there for the next one, right? So number 21, Kimball Avenue Sidewalk Connection, Cypress Channel Project, number 172, award a contract to NPG Inc. in the amount of $54,000 for sidewalk connection improvements between 6509 Kimball Avenue and 15710 San Antonio Avenue crossing over the Cypress Channel. Can we get another report?
The second item
We lost
The
you.
second item from Public Works in front of you tonight is related to accessibility, and is a result of the continuous efforts by staff to address sidewalk connectivity around the city. The 83-foot sidewalk gap along Kimball Avenue spanning along the Cypress Channel was identified and incorporated in the CIP list. Plans, specifications, and quantities were prepared and accepted on October 20th by staff. The project will include the construction of 2 commercial driveway approaches to preserve the San Bernardino County flood control maintenance access to the channel and a sidewalk that will provide a continuous accessible path over the Cypress Channel. On October 21st, 2020, a notice of inviting bids was published on Planet Bids and locally, and on November 10th, 2020, 14 bids were received. A summary of the results is included in your staff report. NPG was deemed to be the lowest responsible and responsive bidder with a bid amount in the amount of $54,444. This project is expected to be completed by mid-January 2021 if weather permits. It's therefore that the staff is recommending the council approves the staff report with the recommendations indicated. This concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any
Okay,
questions.
thank you, Mrs. Frazier. Usually you come in here and ask us for $1.5 million or $2 million. This is much lower than your normal asks. But anyway, anybody in the audience wishing to comment on this particular item? Okay, how about any council comments?
No.
Lucio, Paul, anything from you?
No.
Okay,
No.
entertain a motion.
Sounds good.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
I second.
We have a second. Angela, please.
Councilmember Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Howie?
Yes.
Item passes 3-0.
Okay, yeah, that concludes all our business except for mayor and council reports. This is the time and the place for the mayor, or Mayor Pro Tem in this case, and council members to report on pre-scheduled council committee assignments. The first up will be myself, and I actually have a community support contribution to the Chino Neighborhood House, which takes care of a lot of families. This time of year, I'm asking for a donation of $1,000 to the Chino Neighborhood House from my from my fund. And anybody want to make a comment or make a motion? That'd be great.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, got a motion from Mr. Lucio.
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul. Angela?
Councilmember Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Howie?
And that's a yes. And so just, after, I only have 2 more meetings left with the city council. And in the 8 years that I've been mayor pro tem, I've probably only had to run less than 10 meetings. So our mayors have been very good at attending meetings. And I just want to thank, next meeting will be my last meeting, but I just want to thank everybody for, in the 43 years that I've lived in the city of Chino, it's been an honor to serve on the city council. And we've done some fantastic things in the last 20 years. I'm pretty proud of some of those things, and it's been quite an honor. And I'll make more comments at that time. But that concludes my report for this evening. And the next report will come from Councilmember Lucio.
Yes, mine's going to be brief. Obviously, November 3rd, we had our elections, so I want to congratulate everyone that participated, won the elections. Welcome. Obviously, we'll be welcoming you in later on in December, but I just wanted to congratulate you on your efforts and all the hard work that you guys did. It was a little different this year. Veterans Day was virtual, so I initially texted Rita thinking that we were going to be somewhere, but then I was told just log on to Facebook and be able to watch the event, so it was a little different. On Saturday, I was able to go to the preserve. They were having a food drive over at the All-American Car Wash, so I got there early. It appeared to be a good turnout. I didn't stay until the very end, but I was there to drop off some food, get my car washed, and obviously eat at Taco Dude's, which provided a good lunch. And that's, I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's coming up. I'm trying to grow a mustache for Movember. I don't know if I'm being too successful. I tried to grow a goatee, but it looked too white. So I said to myself, I might as well shave it off. But in support of Movember, I'm trying to participate by growing a mustache. But everybody enjoy the holidays, enjoy the time with your families. I know that there's a limit on how many people can attend your Thanksgiving dinners, but whoever or however many people you have, make sure that they're memorable, and always remember family first. And that's all I have.
Good. Thanks, Mark. Okay, Councilmember Rodriguez, your report?
Yes. Should I start out with the
Yes.
contribution?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to have approval on the amount of to the chief Portuguese.
Okay, I think he said that he wanted a community support contribution of $500 to the Portuguese, the DES club. So I'll make a motion to approve it.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Angela?
Mayor Pro Tem Howie?
Yes.
Councilmember Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Item passes 3-0.
Okay, go ahead, Paul. You can continue with your report, although your phone's breaking up pretty good.
Okay, I'll be very short. This entire week, I've been webinar, so it's been very interesting doing that. Really, I like to wish everyone thanks and be safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Okay. All right, so how about a city manager? Would you have a report?
Mayor Pro Tem, I have no report. Thank you.
No report, okay, all right. And how about our city attorney? A report this evening?
No report either.
How
Thank you.
does it feel to be up on the old dais after 8 months of being down on the floor? Does it feel good again? It's a little high, okay, I get it. All right, very good. Police Chief Simmons, would you like to give us a report?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Howie, and I too am participating in No Shave November. not very successful, but trying to do my part. And
Takes time.
And you'll see members of the Chino Police Department out there this month as well participating in this. And we certainly invite the public to join us. We're participating with Loma Linda University Health, and our funds that we'll be donating will be going there. The other thing I wanted to mention was this month also we'll be out doing an educational campaign to remind people to wear their seatbelt. Though we have really good compliance in the state of California, nationwide, we still have an issue. In fact, almost 50% of all fatal crashes involve somebody not wearing their seatbelt. And what we're finding is the drivers generally wear their seatbelts, but it's the backseat passengers that are not. So make sure your family members are buckled up. Make sure that they're in an appropriate car seat if they're required to do that. And if they're under 8 years of age and the seat is available, they're supposed to ride in the back seat. So just encourage people to be safe. We don't, as we go into the holiday seasons, we don't want to have to deal with any additional fatal traffic collisions. So buckle up and make sure your passengers buckle up.
Great, thanks, Wes.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Okay, man, from fire.
Good evening and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
I just wanted to pass along some information about what's going on in the fire district. We're currently in the process of hiring new employees. Right now, we're in the final stages and we currently have 8 openings. So we're looking forward to bringing those 8 potentially on in the month of March. And we could also have further retirements that are coming in December that would increase that number.
Didn't you just hire like 10? Didn't seem like
Yeah,
that long.
it's ever going, so.
Wow,
you
big
know.
turnover in the district, huh?
That's right. You know, myself, I only have about 13 months to go as well, so
Ah.
time does go.
So do they look pretty young, these the recruits now?
Oh, they do. Yes, they do.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And ultimately, the fire district's been very busy over the last couple weeks. As you know, we had the Blue Ridge Fire.
Yeah.
It was pretty significant toll on all the personnel. For over a week, we had almost over 3/4 of our entire department was working in one form or fashion. They were either out on the fire or they were covering for other people that were out on the fire, and they had to provide service to the district. So we did staff that fire for over a week, 24/7. Currently, the fire, luckily with the rain that came in, has been contained, and we did not lose any structures within our community, which is a fantastic thing. So thank you to all the men and women of the Chino Valley Fire Department and all the effort that was put in forward. We'd also like to thank our partnering agencies such as CAL FIRE, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, as well as the Chino Police Department. They also assisted in evacuations of the people in Chino Hills. And we'd also like to thank all the residents, especially in the communities of Chino Hills, for their just excellent ability to listen, to get out when it was necessary, and then just overwhelming support from the community at large, not just Chino Hills. I was at several fire stations helping with the fire. We were having restaurants that were bringing food to the fire stations from as far away as Laverne and other agencies. It was just overwhelming support. So we're just thankful for the community that we live in. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, congratulations. You guys did a phenomenal job. There was some pretty scary times up in Chino Hills there when that fire, I saw some of the pictures and it was very close to the houses and you guys were able to keep all those structures from damage. That's fantastic. So
The ironic is I was on the same fire in 2008, the freeway fire, and it was almost an identical fire in what the scope and size as well as where the fire went. So very, very similar type of fire. Obviously Santa Ana conditions, something definitely to be aware of.
Yeah, so now it's the Black Hills of Chino Hills for right now, for a while, right?
Not for long.
Not for long. The vegetation will come back.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I think that's it. I think we're done for this evening. And I want to also thank everybody, wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving in next week. And the next regular meeting of the council will be on Tuesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. in these chambers. Good night, and thank you very much. Oh, don't forget the tree lighting at 6 p.m. Yeah. We're adjourned.